When the United States slapped China with a new round of tariffs, the assumption was simple. Economic pressure would force Beijing to retreat. But that's not how this played out. Instead, China responded with a long-planned strategy, one that doesn't just hit American products, but challenges the very foundation of U.S. economic influence. Yes, they retaliated with tariffs of their own, but that's just the surface-level move. Behind the scenes, China is locking down critical supply chains, tightening control over rare resources, and cutting deals with U.S. rivals. Moves designed to weaken America's leverage over time. This isn't just about a trade dispute. It's a slow but deliberate shift in global power. Today, we're breaking it all down. What's really happening behind these trade blows, why this matters far beyond tariffs, and how this fight is reshaping the global economy in ways the U.S. may not be ready for. In February 2025, the United States escalated economic tensions by imposing new tariffs on over $60 billion worth of Chinese goods. This wasn't some random last-minute decision. It was a calculated move, continuing Trump's long-standing push to restore American manufacturing. The new tariffs targeted computer parts, electric vehicle materials, and essential resources for modern technology. The goal: force China to change its trade practices. But instead of backing down, China went far beyond simple countermeasures. While the U.S. framed its move as a way to protect American jobs, Beijing saw it as an attack on its economic and geopolitical standing. Their response: calculated, strategic, and designed for long-term impact. Within days, China announced $35 billion in retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, focusing on farming, energy, and cars. But the real story? It wasn't just about what they targeted, it was where. China's response wasn't just about economics. It was a surgical strike on politically sensitive regions in the U.S. Midwest soybeans. Targeted. Texas oil. Hit with new tariffs. Why? Because Beijing knows these industries hold serious political weight in Washington. When farmers in Iowa and energy executives in Houston start losing billions, they put pressure on lawmakers to change U.S. policies. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Beyond tariffs, China was already laying the groundwork for something bigger, diversifying its trade dependencies. Instead of relying on the U.S., China strengthened trade ties with Brazil, Russia, and even Mexico, finding new suppliers to reduce its reliance on American goods. While Washington was focused on economic pressure, Beijing was building an entirely new strategy. Most people looked at tariffs. They missed the real threat: China's control over rare earth minerals. These materials are essential for smartphones, electric vehicles, and even military technology, and China controls over 80% of the global supply. After the U.S. imposed tariffs, China subtly hinted at limiting exports of these critical materials. This wasn't an empty threat. It was a direct attack on industries the U.S. can't function without, especially its tech and defense sectors. Imagine trying to build next-gen fighter jets or AI-powered computers without the raw materials needed to make them work. This wasn't about loud retaliation. It was about using economic leverage where it truly matters. It didn't stop at farming. China then turned to America's energy industry. Beijing slapped new tariffs on U.S. oil and liquefied natural gas, LNG, a direct hit to one of the most lucrative American exports. This had immediate consequences. U.S. energy companies lost massive contracts. Shipments got delayed, and profits took a major hit. At the same time, China deepened energy deals with Russia and the Middle East. Even if tariffs are lifted, those new partnerships are likely to stay, cutting the U.S. out of one of the world's biggest energy markets. The U.S. had another weapon: blocking China's access to advanced technology. Washington banned the sale of high-tech computer chips and cut off major Chinese firms like Huawei from doing business with American companies. China's response: build its own technology empire. Massive government funding for chip manufacturing, heavy investment in AI and 5G, and new tech giants rising to rival Silicon Valley. Here's the irony. Instead of crippling China's tech sector, the US may have actually made it stronger. Chinese companies are now developing products that compete with, or even outperform, American ones. This isn't just a trade war anymore. It's a global race for tech dominance. And China is catching up, and even surpassing in some areas. China also holds another economic weapon: U.S. debt. Beijing owns over $800 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. Selling all of it at once would hurt China too, but even small reductions shake global markets. After the latest tariffs, China quietly started buying less U.S. debt. The effect? U.S. borrowing costs rise. Higher interest rates on home loans, car loans, and credit cards, and increased financial strain for everyday Americans. It's a silent but powerful form of economic pressure, one that tariffs can't fix. While the US was busy escalating tariffs, China was securing its global influence. Beijing signed new trade agreements with the European Union, Southeast Asia, Russia, and Latin America. The goal? Reduce dependence on the US and expand into new markets. For American businesses, this is a massive problem. Losing Chinese consumers is one thing, but now they're also facing stronger competition in markets they once dominated. One of the biggest long-term consequences? A complete restructuring of global supply chains. For decades, American companies relied on China for manufacturing, but with rising tensions, many are now shifting production elsewhere. China saw this coming. Beijing has been heavily investing in Vietnam, Indonesia, and even Africa to build alternative supply routes. This means higher costs for U.S. companies moving production, longer timelines for new factories, and a permanent shift in global trade routes. Perhaps one of the hardest hit sectors in this trade war: American agriculture. For years, China was one of the biggest buyers of U.S. agricultural products, from soybeans and corn to pork and wheat. But once tariffs hit, China slashed its purchases and turned to Brazil and Argentina instead. For American farmers, the impact was devastating. Crops had nowhere to go, prices plummeted, and farmers took on crushing debt. Some received government bailouts, but that's a band-aid, not a solution. The real fear: China's new suppliers may become permanent. Even if tariffs are lifted, Brazilian and Argentine farmers are now locked in with China. For Midwest farming communities, this isn't just an economic crisis. It's a political one. Their frustration is forcing Washington to rethink its approach. But China's next move? It wasn't just about finding new suppliers. It was about controlling the entire global food chain. Beyond just buying from other countries, China has been investing heavily in foreign agriculture. Massive land acquisitions in South America and Africa, joint farming ventures in Russia and Central Asia, cutting-edge agricultural technology to boost domestic food production. This means China won't just buy food, it will produce it. For U.S. farmers, this is an existential threat. If China owns the farms, it controls the prices. It can undercut American agriculture on the global stage. And for the first time, Washington is realizing that this trade war isn't just about soybeans. It's about who feeds the world. When countries hit each other with tariffs, it's not just corporations that suffer. Everyday people feel it too. How? Through higher prices. Electronics and clothing? More expensive because of tariffs on Chinese imports. Food and groceries? Prices spiked due to supply chain disruptions. Home appliances and vehicles? Costlier because raw materials got hit. This is a hidden tax. One most people don't even realize until they see it at the checkout line. And when businesses face higher import costs, guess what? They pass it on to consumers. So while this trade war was sold as a way to help the American economy, for many families, it's just meant higher bills. Global markets hate uncertainty, and the U.S. China trade war has created plenty of it. Every time a new tariff is announced, stock markets react, sometimes with massive drops, sometimes with wild swings. Investors aren't just worried about tariffs, they're worried about what they signal. Media. Worried investors watching screens, empty factory floor, assembly line slowdown, slower economic growth, falling corporate profits, supply chain instability. Tech giants, car manufacturers, and retail brands depend on international trade. When tariffs hit, their stock prices tumble. But it's not just about Wall Street. This kind of market volatility impacts pensions, retirement accounts, and everyday investments. A shaky market means more risk and less financial security for millions of Americans. While the United States and China are the main players, this trade war has sent shockwaves across the world. Southeast Asian countries are struggling with supply chain disruptions. European companies are paying higher costs to import goods linked to U.S. China trade. Developing nations that supply raw materials to China are suffering from reduced demand. The result? A slowdown in global economic growth. This is not just a fight between two superpowers. The entire world economy is caught in the crossfire. And as the United States and China continue to escalate, businesses and governments across the world are scrambling to adjust. While Washington and Beijing dominated the headlines, Canada and Mexico were dealing with their own economic battles. When the U.S. imposed tariffs on China, it didn't stop there. Canada and Mexico were also hit. Their response? They hit back. Canada targeted U.S. farm products with retaliatory tariffs. Mexico slapped new taxes on American steel, pork, and whiskey. But here's where things get interesting. Both countries started looking toward China. Canada expanded trade with Asia and the EU. Mexico strengthened ties with Chinese manufacturers. This shift is eroding U.S. influence right in its own backyard. For decades, North America was seen as an economic stronghold. But now, Mexico is importing more Chinese goods. Canada is forging deeper trade ties outside the U.S. What started as a tariff dispute is now weakening America's economic dominance in its own neighborhood. Trade wars are easy to start, but incredibly hard to end. Even if Washington and Beijing reach a new deal, the damage is already done. Business relationships, fractured. Supply chains, rewired. Trust, broken. China isn't playing defense anymore. It's going on offense. It's investing in its own industries. It's forging new trade alliances. And it's working toward economic independence from the U.S. For Washington, the challenge is bigger than just tariffs. Can the U.S. maintain its economic influence in a world where China is steadily building new global networks? Or is China positioning itself as the dominant force in the next era of global trade? The U.S.-China trade war isn't just about tariffs anymore. It's about who will shape the future of the global economy. Will the U.S. adapt and find new ways to counter China's influence? Or will China's long-term strategy make it the new economic superpower? One thing is certain. This fight is far from over, and the decisions made in the next few years will determine who leads the global economy for decades to come. The U.S.-China trade war isn't just a battle over tariffs. It's a blueprint for the future of global power. Every move China makes isn't random. It's calculated. The question is the U.S. strategy working? Or is China quietly gaining the upper hand? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. We're glad you're enjoying this video. Please like and subscribe. Check out another video that is now on your screen.